Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I'm your host, Ryan Dunlevy. That's my co-host, Rob Dunham.
Without a beard.
Without a beard. Sans beard.
Yeah.
Nice.
I just decided to take it off. So perhaps it will make an appearance in a future podcast.
Indeed. But this is not a facial hair podcast, unfortunately.
It was unfortunate.
It is, in fact, a movie podcast.
I think we do have to have a best facial hair in a movie.
Oh, yes.
No.
I like that. That. I'm gonna write that down for a future episode. Yeah, that's good. But we will, of course, talk about the box office. Lots of movies came out this weekend. Maybe some you want to see, hopefully. Then we'll have an interesting discussion. Whose career would you rather have? So we'll put two actors up against each other, and we get to decide whose career we'd rather have. So that should be fun. And of course, we'll wrap up with our watch list, movies we've watched over the past week. All right, Rob, let's jump into it. So the box office from this last week, we have a new number one. First week in the box office, Alien Romulus, $42 million. Not a bad showing.
Yeah.
Deadpool and Wolverine still came in second. In its fourth week in the box office, it made $30 million. It has made a total of $546 million domestically, and that is really close to $547 million domestically.
Yeah, and that's only a 44.5% drop, I think, from last week.
Yep. So this movie continues to dominate, but it did get dethroned off of the number one crown by Alien Romulus. It ends with Us in its second week, did $23.8 million, 52.4% drop off from week one. So not a bad drop off at all, right in the average margin. It did, interestingly enough, pick up 128 theaters. So it was actually in 128 more theaters this week than it was last week, interestingly. Twisters, in its fifth week, did a cool flat $10 million, basically. It is at $238 million domestically. Awesome job for that movie. And sneaking into the top five this week, Coraline, back in the theaters for its 15th anniversary, did $9.8 million. That is really impressive. People really wanted to go see that one back in theaters.
Yes, Tim Burton love here. We're going to see some extended push there for Beetlejuice coming up. Perhaps.
I do remember when this one originally came out in theaters, people saying, oh, this is one you got to see in theaters. The visuals are really great. The visuals are really interesting. I didn't go see it in theaters, but I remember that conversation.
Yeah. It's a very unique, unsettling kind of movie with the animation in like a really good way.
So lots to choose from here. What's your flavor talking about the box office?
I'm pleasantly surprised to see that Alien Romulus did so well. I had the opportunity. Did you see it yet?
I have not.
I had the opportunity to go see it, and I think it is very deserving of being number one in the box office. And man, Deadpool and Wolverine to make over $30 million, like that showing is better than so many other movies' first weeks.
Yes, it is.
And then there's movies like Horizon.
Yeah. Out on streaming now, though.
Yeah, already on HBO Max. Well, I guess it's just called Max now, but
check that out.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty good week overall. I mean, a nice, like, broad range of movies getting people to go see them, and I do think it ends with us picking out theaters is a pretty cool thing too, because I think it shows that they're listening to like the audience, because I think it did better than even people thought it would do. So
yeah, it's very close. I didn't announce the total for that one. It's very close to $100 million now in 2 weeks. So it's really,
with that
really
kind of movie. It's phenomenal. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, that movie probably had a budget of like 15-20 million.
Yeah. So it's probably already made money, even with all the extra nonsense that gets thrown into
Yeah.
making it, as Matt Damon elucidated for us last week.
Yes, precursor. You may hear from Matt Damon again in this podcast.
Oh, oh,
um, yeah, I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna take on the Coraline thing. I have not seen any of these re-releases come close to cracking the top five. So a lot of times, even the top 10 when they re-release these movies. So for Coraline to do $9.8 million on a re-release is really fascinating to me. Um, your conjecture was kind of that it was a Tim Burton thing leading up to the release of Beetlejuice.
yeah,
Could make sense. Absolutely could make sense. My initial thought was, as I indicated, that it was a movie that people loved to see in theaters and wanted to see in theaters. I think yours probably makes a little bit more sense in terms of why it made as much money. But that really surprised me because I think the total gross for this movie is like $12 million.
Hmm.
And that might just be the 15th anniversary release. I will look
yeah,
it up and see what it made in its original run.
yeah. It did
But
decent. I think it was like insane, but it did pretty well. If
yeah.
I recall.
So this one I think was released possibly midweek, which is why it has a link to it. Okay, it did opening weekend. It did $16.8 million in U.S. and Canada gross. It did 106 million gross worldwide, 161 million. So yeah,
Yeah,
it was pretty good. That was a pretty good showing for an animated movie. Um, but yeah, it's really interesting that coming back to theaters to make almost $10 million is really
yeah. I
fast.
mean, like what you're saying is it made like almost a tenth of its full gross in its original release in a weekend
Yeah,
as a re-release. That is pretty crazy.
that is pretty crazy, and I think that is the biggest re-release of any of the ones I've seen recently. I
Mm.
can't verify that, but there have been a number of re-releases recently. I don't remember any of them cracking the top five.
Yeah, I don't remember what the Phantom Menace made. That might be the one that was close, but I don't remember exactly what it made.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is the last week's box office for you. Now let's talk about what came out this weekend. We have a number of releases this weekend. A lot of stuff coming out in the kind of horror thriller genre as we um, as we get closer to fall. But usually you see more of these closer to
I mean,
Halloween.
if we've got like pumpkin spice latte flavored everything, why not scary movie everything?
Indeed, it seems like this weekend is the official turn over to the more fallish type movies. But here's what we got. Between the Temples, rated R, 1 hour and 51-minute runtime. And this movie is a cantor in the crisis of faith finds his world turned upside down when his grade school music teacher re-enters his life as his new adult bar mitzvah student. And this is starring Jason Schwartzman and Carol Kane. Next up, we have Blink Twice, rated R, 1 hour and 42-minute runtime. When tech billionaires Slater King meets cocktail waitress Frida at his fundraising gala, he invites her to join him and his friends on a dream vacation on his private island. As strange things start to happen, Frida questions her reality. And this one stars Channing Tatum, Aaliyah Shawkat, Naomi Aki, and Zoe Kravitz is the director on this one, interestingly enough. Next, we have The Crow, rated R, 1 hour and 51-minute runtimes. Soulmates Eric and Shelley are brutally murdered. Given the chance to save the love of his life, Eric must sacrifice himself and transverse the worlds of the living and the dead, seeking revenge. Bill Skarsgård and FKA Twigs star in this one. Next up, we have The Forge, rated PG, run at time of 2 hours and 3 minutes. After graduating from high school without any plans for the future, Isaiah receives a push to start making better life decisions. Karen Abercrombie and Cameron Arnett. And we have Strange Darling, rated R, an hour and 36-minute runtime. Nothing is as it seems when a twisted one-night stand spirals into a serial killer's vicious murder spree. Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner are your lead actors in this one. And also of note, in some theaters, you will be able to find Rear Window 70th anniversary release this weekend. So that's kind of cool. 70. It doesn't seem like that movie is 70 years old, but apparently it is 70 years old. So what do you want to talk about? We've got a number of choices. What intrigues you? What do you make of the number of entrants here?
It's pretty crazy to have so many movies coming out in one weekend. A lot of weekends we've had like a movie or two movies.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. It's not like it's a week before the major holiday weekend.
Yeah. And even crazier is that like I'm interested in several of these, so I might actually go out to the theater more than once this week. I want to see Strange Darling, The Crow, and Blink Twice at the very least. And then there's another movie you didn't even mention called Stream that's coming out. It's an independent horror movie that I'm also interested in seeing, but has a very much more limited options in the theater. So I'm not sure if I'll get a chance to see it or not. But out of the ones that are coming out, I think I'm most interested in The Crow, and then Blink Twice be behind that, and Strange Darling behind that. Very fascinating to me to see Channing Tatum as a bad guy.
Yeah.
Because we haven't really seen much of that. So I'm interested in seeing how that goes.
For sure. I would say Blink Twice is probably the primary one out of these that I would see. I think The Crow looks like an interesting movie, but it's kind of on the like goth darker side that I don't know. So I don't know if I'm as intrigued with The Crow, but Blink Twice could be interesting, especially if it falls more on the thriller side of the horror genre than on the more strict horror, which it seems like from the trailers that it is.
I would say typically, but not always, if there's like a huge actor in it, like Channing Tatum is in this one, it does tend to lean more towards the suspense, drama side than the horror side. And when it comes to The Crow, there's actually a lot of people who love the first one who really don't like this was made at all. So I'm very interested in seeing if the people who like the first one will come see this, or if they'll boycott it, or what's going to happen, how well it's going to do. I really like the first one. I actually just saw it recently at the drive-in again, and I am interested in seeing this, and we'll be going to see it at some point.
Nice. I do want to give a shout out to Rear Window. Unique concept movie, and basically you have seen a version of this, even if you've never seen Rear Window, the movie. You have seen a version of this because it's an often copied plot device that works on a number of levels. I've seen it in other movies. I've seen it in TV shows. The basic premise is a guy is basically held up in his home. He's injured and can't leave his apartment. But all he does is stare out the window, and then he observes what appears to be a murder taking place in a room across the street that is through another window that he's looking at, and he's trying to do what he can to solve this thriller as a result of what he sees out of his window. And so there have been versions of this in lots and lots of different things. It's a really interesting plot point, and it's been often copied.
Can we also talk about the fact that maybe from Arrested Development is in the movie, and I really, really hope George Michael just shows up and standing awkwardly on Channing Tatum's island for no reason.
Yes. And Blink Twice, yes, for sure. Strange Darling has Willa Fitzgerald in it. If you've watched any of the first season of Jack Reacher on Amazon Prime, she is one of the main stars in that one. All right, so that's the box office for you. And now we'll move to our discussion. This is something that I came across. I kind of had this idea after listening to, ironically, a hockey podcast. This is kind of movie adjacent. maybe some of you saw that Keanu Reeves signed a one-day contract with an OHL minor league hockey team in Canada. And he was signing autographs and signing their jerseys and that sort of stuff. And the backstory there is he was actually supposed to play for this team when he was younger. He was goalie. He was an actual any hockey prospect, and he was a goalie, but got injured, and then that kind of ended his hockey career. But he signed a one-day contract for them. But in this podcast, they were talking about his career and how his career might have been different. It just got me the idea of comparing careers between actors. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to put two actors up against each other, and then we'll talk back and forth about which one had the better career, which career we would have rather had between the two. All right. So here's our first pair. Matt Damon versus Denzel Washington. All right. So how do we want to break this down here? Let's start like this. When you think of, let's say what movies we think of when it comes to each of these actors. What primarily comes into your head? Start with Matt Damon. What comes to your mind?
Jason Bourne is absolutely at the top of the list for me when I think of Matt Damon.
Yeah. What comes after?
Probably The Martian. I think next. Definitely not Happy Feet 2 when he paid Bill the Krill.
So I will say the order for me is exactly right. It's Jason Bourne, it's The Martian, and then it's Good Will Hunting. And maybe I'd be persuaded to switch Good Will Hunting and The Martian. There might be some recency there. Really, really interesting. Matt Damon, and has had a massive career. What do you think of? What movies do you think of when you think of Denzel Washington?
I think of Denzel Washington shooting people he's mad at.
Fair enough.
Which would be the Equalizer movies and Heat and almost every movie Denzel Washington has ever been
in. So interestingly enough, it took me a second to think about which ones I think of. One for me would be The Pelican Brief. I really like The Pelican Brief, and I think he's excellent at it. That was one he did early in the 90s. Deja Vu is another one that I think of for him. And probably
Deja Vu.
No, probably the next one I would think about might be Inside Man. Yeah, Inside Man would be up there for me. Both have had different careers, but very interesting careers. So let's break it down a little bit here. I pulled up some of their box office numbers, and there's some interesting stats here. Matt Damon has starred as the leading actor in 37 movies. He has been the supporting actor in 15 movies and a lead ensemble member in 9, a cameo in 7, and an extra in 2. Can you name one of the movies Matt Damon was an extra in?
I can, because I looked through the entire list. I could not name it before I looked at this list, but Matt Damon was in Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams. Did you know he was in Field of Dreams?
I didn't. I'm not even sure that's real. I'm gonna have to watch the whole movie again and try and find a little.
Trying to find some random extra where Matt Damon shows up.
Yeah.
But so he has had a broad range of roles over the years. Conversely, Denzel Washington is almost exclusively a lead actor. He has been the lead actor in 47 movies, a supporting actor in only 3, and an ensemble member in 2. So when Denzel Washington is in a movie, he's the guy. Now, of course, you have Matt Damon had the series of movies, the Ocean's movies, which were ensemble cast movies. But so from that standpoint, Denzel has had a little bit of a longer career. But Matt Damon has done a wider range of roles. Now, when you get down to, let's say, how much their box office pulled, as a lead or ensemble actor, actually, let's just go with all acting credits. Let's go with all acting credits. Matt Damon has a total of 73 movies, which domestically have made $4.4 billion, $5.5 billion internationally, for a total of $9.937 billion at the box office. He is ranked number 16th on worldwide aggregate in terms of box office revenue. When we go down to all acting credits for Denzel Washington, 54 films, 2.6 billion domestic, 1.87 billion internationally, for a total of $4.48 billion globally. This would put him ranked 35th in the all-time acting list in terms of international box office. So that's just a couple of stats on this. How do you want to break down the difference between Matt Damon and Denzel Washington?
I mean, to me, it's very simple, and kind of how I view most of these, with actually one of the ones we're going to look at being the reverse. My argument for Matt Damon, my argument is Matt Damon, and my argument for Matt Damon is the variety of roles that he has played. I would much rather have a career where I have done so many different things. Like I said, when I think of Denzel Washington, I think of angry guy who goes and gets revenge on people. And that might not be a fault of his, because like you mentioned, a couple of his other movies that are not that. But to me, Matt Damon has had a much broader range of kinds of roles. And I'm zeroing in on a 5-movie stretch here that I think is typical of Matt Damon's work as we go throughout his career. And those 5 movies would be The Rainmaker, Good Will Hunting, Saving Private Ryan, Rounders, and Dogma. Because in each of those 5 movies, he's doing something different. And I think that is evidence of why, to me, I would rather have his career. And then on top of that, you've got Jason Bourne, which is like one of the biggest action stars in probably the history of film. We've talked about this, how it was transformational in the entire genre of action. James Bond will always be a bigger name, but Jason Bourne changed James Bond. And I think that's a huge thing. And it also just changed the entire course of action movies. I also love the Ocean's movies. He's obviously not as big a character in those as George Clooney or Brad Pitt are, but he's still an important part of the movies. Beyond that, I've liked what he's done going forward with his career, like with The Informant, playing a comedy role, a guy who's way out of his depth. He did that incredibly well. And then you look at Invictus, when he's playing like the main guy in a huge feel-good sports movie, dealing with some really intense and big cultural issues. I really liked Green Zone too, which was I'm sure that was a very hard role for him to play, because that movie in a lot of ways is just a tough movie to watch, because a lot of it, when I was watching, I was like, I don't want any of this to be true, but we know aspects of it were true. Whether or not it's all true can be argued, but certainly aspects of it were true, and it's frustrating. So I would imagine being in that role would be hard to do. And then the fact that he's just continued to be prolific in what he's doing, and most recently the big one he would be in would be Oppenheimer. The fact that he's hung around, he's still starring in these movies that are making like tons and tons of money, even if made a lot of money, and he was a character in that made over $100 million. So I don't think Matt Damon's going away anytime soon. And my argument would be that and Ford versus Ferrari too, which came out a few years ago. He just does a great job at getting into a character and embodying that character. And I think that's very, very much to his credit, because he's not like a Gary Oldman type person who changes his look.
He's not a chameleon.
he doesn't change his look and like accents and stuff very much. But in this, at the same time, he's able to portray these different characters in ways that you actually believe they're different people.
Mm-hmm. I would tend to lean towards Matt Damon as well, but I'll make the case a little bit for Denzel. One, he has won 2 Oscars as opposed to Matt Damon's 1, and both of Denzel's were for acting. Matt Damon's was for best screenplay for Good Will Hunting. Not to take anything away or to say that one is better than the other. They've both been nominated a bunch of times, but Denzel has a best actor for his role in Training Day as a lead actor, and he has a best supporting actor for his role in Glory. So he's got 2 acting things, as well as he has, I think you're underestimating his range a little bit in terms of, now it might just be your impression of it. That's fine. But he's got movies like The Great Debaters. He's got like Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, where he plays kind of a demure guy. You have, The Crimson Tide, the sub movie, or he played Malcolm X. He's played in a couple of adaptations of Shakespeare, Much Ado About Nothing, and The Tragedy of Macbeth. Though obviously Macbeth is very revenge oriented. But even things like I said, The Pelican Brief or Philadelphia, Preacher's Wife. So he's got a good variety. Played the football coach in Remember the Titans, another standout role for him, I would argue. So I think he's got a lot of range. One of the things I could say that there has been a number of times where he has had a great performance in a not great movie. Think of like John Q or Two Guns. Movies like that the movie itself is not that great. Out of Time would be another example where he is good in a movie that's not that great. So I think you can make a case that he has a good amount of range. He has been the leading man in almost every single role he gets. Now you could say that means he doesn't have the ability to play anything else. The other side is he's carried box office films for a very, very long time, since back in the late 80s and early 90s. So his career is slightly longer than Damon's. I think if you ask people who some of the best actors of that generation would be, I think Denzel would probably come up before Matt Damon would. So that's my case for Denzel Washington. But all that being said, I probably think that overall Damon has had a better career and a more successful career, although they're both, one's 17 and one's 35 on the all-time actors list. Both of them are doing great.
Yeah. Denzel Washington too is, for your argument, is he's kind of like a paragon representative of what a popular actor would be.
Yeah.
And we saw that even played off of in the movie Game Night, where the one lady thinks that she went on a date with Denzel Washington, and turns out it was not Denzel Washington, it was just some random guy. Well, the fact that people specifically know his style, they mock his style or make light of it, speaks to the fact that he does have a style that's recognizable. People know who Denzel is.
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. Okay, so we both kind of came down on the side of Matt Damon on that one. All right, our next candidates that we're going to compare careers to: Keanu Reeves versus George Clooney. Interesting matchup.
All right, this is the hardest one for me out of the 4.
Okay.
And the reason is because I like both of them.
They are both great.
I just like them. And I think that the majority of people would probably say George Clooney off the bat, because I think Keanu Reeves is severely under-respected, underrated, and maligned. Just because of his personality.
Yeah, and I think... Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think one of the things that's interesting here is George Clooney is always seen as the the debonair guy, the popular, like a next generation, like Frank Sinatra actor type. Whereas Keanu Reeves is always kind of seen as, no, is he really that good of an actor? And he's kind of a dope and he kind of exists. But you actually look what Keanu Reeves has done, and it is interesting. It is really interesting. So what are the movies you think of with Keanu?
I mean, I'd like to point out that my wife said The Lake House.
Yes, he will be forever known for the Lake
Yeah,
House.
yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with her on that one, but obviously Keanu Reeves, unless you live under a rock, the first thing you think of is The Matrix.
Mm.
And then I mean, but there are like Bill and Ted, John Wick.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously now with these newer movies that he's done and will be continuing to do. There's a spinoff of John Wick coming next year.
Yeah.
Ballerina that he's going to be in.
Mm-hmm.
He has a way to embody these characters that are in multiple movies and like bring real life into them. And people would argue that he's like a wooden type actor, but and there's certainly an argument for that. But in a movie like series like The Matrix, that's kind of what you needed
Mm-hmm.
for that character. Somebody who is completely out of his depth, just waking up to what's around him and being like dazed and confused, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
I think that he's shown through the John Wick series that he's evolved past that and through that some too, because I think there's some genuine emotion shown in that series, even though there's a lot of action and violence. And I do think he deserves a lot of respect for the fact that he's actually super well trained in not only martial arts, but in the use of firearms. Like he's an actual firearm user. Like he goes to ranges. He actually knows how to shoot these things he's shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see him in a movie doing it, if you know anything about shooting a gun, you can tell that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of actors don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny because he has developed an incredible career out of knowing what he does well and finding movies that accentuate that and finding series that accentuate that. Of course, there is still like his normal, like laconic and wooden type stereotypical character. And then you have Bill and Ted, which is anything but. And it's so funny that that's part of his repertoire too. All right. What do you think of when you, George Clooney? What comes to your mind?
So when I think of George Clooney, the words lovable scamp come to my mind.
Mm.
And like he's always that guy with the quip, the sarcastic line, the wry smirk, the guy who's up to no good. But we'll find a way to get it worked out in the end. Obviously, for me, embodied by being the main character in the Ocean's 11 movie, Danny Ocean. And then the other one for me that I think of right away with George Clooney is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah,
because that's like the epitome of that kind of character. And then beyond that, even the Fantastic Mr. Fox he's basically the same character but an animated version of it.
Yeah, I would definitely think of the Ocean's movies with him. I would also think of Michael Clayton and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou for sure. Definitely don't think of Batman.
Wait, George Clooney was Batman?
Apparently.
I do have to say I really did like at the end of the new Flash that it was George Clooney who came out of the limo at the end as Batman. That made me very happy.
Yeah. And so if we're comparing multiple things here, so let's get with the box office numbers here. All acting credits, 46 movies for him. 2.57 billion domestic, 2.82 billion international, for a total of 5.4 billion in the box office revenues as a result of him. He is number 58 on the list. Keanu Reeves. For him, this is 66 movies acted in, 2.9 million domestic, 3.7 million international, for 6.6 billion globally, and that ranks him 49th. So in terms of who has made more money at the box office, Keanu Reeves has made more money at the box office. George Clooney has 2 Oscars to the Keanu Reeves 0 Oscars. George Clooney won for Best Supporting Actor for the 2005 film Syriana, which is quite the trip. He's been nominated a number of times. He also won for being a part of the team for Argo in 2012. I think he was a producer on that film, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so George Clooney also has a very interesting career in that he acted in a movie in 1988, 1987, 1988, and then nothing again until 1996. And a large part of that, obviously, is that he was one of the main characters on the TV show ER.
Yep.
So it's a fascinating career if you think about it, because he went from a bit parts in a couple movies, no one knows who he is. Then he's on ER as one of the main guys. Everyone knows who he is. And then like 3 movies later, he's Batman.
Yeah.
And like Batman does not do super well.
Yeah.
So I think very easily it could have gone the opposite direction for him, and he could have said, well, maybe I should just stick with TV and go back and do something with that, because he was absolutely beloved as that character on ER, and everyone respected him, knew who he was, thought he was great in that. And then he was starting to hear like, oh, you're not very good.
Yeah.
But it seems like he took that response and turned it around and was like, well, I'm just gonna keep going, because I think that from that point on, like if you look at the movies he did after Batman, The Peacemaker, Out of Sight, The Thin Red Line, Three Kings, The Perfect Storm, like these are movies that are not easy. And certainly not guaranteed success. And the fact that The Perfect Storm made $182 million domestically compared to Batman and Robin making $107 million.
Yeah.
By all accounts, out of those 2 movies, Batman and Robin should have made significantly more than The Perfect Storm. So the fact that The Perfect Storm did so well is evidence, I mean, not only to George Clooney, but to Mark Wahlberg, et cetera, to everyone who was involved in that movie. But to me, it shows I have a lot of respect for that he dug in and pursued these roles that he would actually have to really act in. Not to say that Batman and Robin wasn't a hard role. I mean, it's Batman, but it's not the same as like The Thin Red Line or Three Kings or The Perfect Storm. Those are much more intensive, hard acting roles. And as much as I like what Keanu Reeves has done, he hasn't necessarily taken on many roles like that. And I don't know if that's necessarily his fault, because he might just not have pursued them or been offered them because of his skill set.
Interestingly enough, like George Clooney has a market on. He's always been kind of like the sexy man type symbol, and Keanu Reeves in recent years is kind of like morphed into this guy that he's just the cool guy that everyone loves.
Yeah.
Like you're always hearing some cool story about something he did, or him just being around and being cool with everybody and just being a normal kind of guy. He's got this interesting cool guy reputation now, which is really fascinating. So give me your verdict. Which one are you choosing? Which career?
This is probably against the rules, so I'm going with a draw.
Interesting.
After talking it through even more, I can't. I have a hard time separating them, and their career box office earnings seem to indicate that too. But I mean, George Clooney obviously has more awards, but I think Keanu Reeves might have more cultural relevance. So for that reason, I would call it a draw for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna fall on the side of Keanu for this one. As much as I respect George Clooney's acting, the Matrix films were revolutionary in the late 90s, early 2000s, both in their technology and their acting. And he was awesome, and he was an integral part of those. And then to come back 2 decades later and kind of do it again with action films when it came to the John Wick series. I really like some of the stuff that Keanu has done, and I kind of admire a guy who knows what he's good at, knows what his limitations are, and manages to absolutely maximize his potential on those. And that's what I think about for Keanu. So while I think George Clooney is a better actor, I'm going to lean towards Keanu in terms of which career I'd rather have. All right. So let's move on. And since we covered two male actors, let's go over to the women. And our first up for the women is Emma Stone versus Jennifer Lawrence. All right. What movies do you think of when you think of Emma Stone?
I think La La Land is the one that I think of first.
Okay.
Easy A would be another one
Mm-hmm.
that comes immediately to mind. At first glance, now I'm gonna be honest, I haven't done a deep dive necessarily into Emma Stone's side of things, but at first, if I hadn't looked at either person's movies, I would see more depth like that I can personally recall on Jennifer Lawrence's side of things. But I'm sure Emma Stone has done more that I'm just not recalling. So what do you think of with Emma Stone?
So I would think of, the first one I would think of with her is definitely Easy A. Another one I would think of is Zombieland. Would be another one that I would think of with Emma Stone, and then I would think La La Land as well. Yeah, for sure. She has played in a number of different roles. Like she was really good. She was pretty good in Crazy Stupid Love. She played Gwen Stacy. She was in The Help. She's had a lot of roles as kind of a lead, but she tends to have that kind of at least until recently, her roles were, I'll be the funny comedic actor that everyone really likes. Now she has branched out from that quite a bit since then, especially in her later career. But yeah, all right. What do you think of when you think of Jennifer Lawrence?
Obviously, Mother. Just kidding.
I mean, how could you not?
In spite of Mother, I think of Jennifer Lawrence as Katniss Everdeen. I mean, how could you not?
Yeah.
And beyond that, also the Silver Linings Playbook. So the big one. Obviously, that's the one that she's gotten the most critical acclaim for. Well deserved, in my opinion. Also, if you've never seen the Silver Linings Playbook, you probably should see it.
Yeah,
especially if you like the Philadelphia Eagles, probably make you happy.
Indeed. So yeah, I would definitely think of the Hunger Games, of course. That's the primary stuff I would think of her in. But I also really like the movie Passengers, which I thought she was good in. And yeah, I think those are the main ones that would come to mind immediately. I mean, she did play Raven in the X-Men First Class movies. But it's so hard to identify with her with that character because her entire character is blue the whole time, you know?
And she played Raven also in Dark Phoenix, which we I think pretend does not exist.
Yeah. Yeah, she played in a couple movies, X-Men Apocalypse, Dark Phoenix, yeah.
I thought she was pretty good in Red Sparrow too, which came out in 2008. Where she played an undercover Soviet sleeper agent.
Yeah. So let's compare box office numbers here. So acting credits, 28 acting credits for Emma Stone, 1.95 billion domestic, 2.78 million international, for a total of 4.73 billion worldwide. That ranks her 183rd. Jennifer Lawrence, on the other hand, has 27 acting credits, 2.6 billion domestic, 3.4 billion international, and 6.1 billion overall. that ranks her 17th. So, largely on the success of the Hunger Games movies, she has made more money than Emma Stone box office wise. Which do you think has, if you would say fame quotient, which one has more of a fame quotient?
I think it's Jennifer Lawrence by a lot because of the Hunger Games.
Mm-hmm.
And like I would say earlier, I made the argument that I'd rather have somebody's career because the broadness of what they've done. I think for Jennifer Lawrence, it's the opposite. I'd rather have her career because of how well she carried that role and how well she's known for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Jennifer Lawrence is probably more famous. I would say that famous, infamous, even at times. Um, but yeah, I think she probably has a little bit more on that standpoint, probably for that. Um, and when it comes to Oscars, um, they both have some. Jennifer Lawrence has one for Silver Linings Playbook, for leading actress, and Emma Stone has two. Twice she won for leading actress, one for La La Land, and just last year for Poor Things. So she has two to Jennifer Lawrence's one. All right. Any other factors to consider?
I don't think so.
Render your judgment, sir. Whose career would you rather have?
Yeah, I would go with Jennifer Lawrence as of right now, but I'm going to give the caveat that I think 10 years from now, the answer could very well be different.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Emma Stone. I think Jennifer Lawrence has the heights in some ways. I think her career really took a downturn a little bit, as it were, in recent times. I like a lot of the movies that Emma Stone has done, and I think some of her performances have been really, really exceptional. And even though Jennifer Lawrence has made more money, I think I would take Emma Stone's career. Now, with the caveat of a number of her recent movies, I'm like, really? Really? So she's trying to expand her role. I don't know that I've loved that stuff better. I don't think I have. So we'll see. But right now I would choose Emma Stone. All right, wrapping up the last one from these, we have Meryl Streep and Helen Mirren. So two absolute veteran actresses to consider. All right, Meryl Streep, what movies do you think of?
I mean, Meryl Streep has been in everything. I need to pull my list up here that I had. Why don't you go first?
So okay. I can catch it. So Meryl Streep, one of the first ones I think of is Julie and Julia, where she played Julia Child. And I think that that is one of the movies that I think of when I see her for sure. She tends to be in a decent number of movies that I am not particular. She's not number one on my list of actresses in terms of ones who make movies. The second one I would think of is Devil Wears Prada. So those would probably be the two I would think of as Julie and Julia, and The Devil Wears Prada are probably the two ones that I would think of primarily when it comes to her. But she's been in a lot of movies for a very long time. How about you?
Yeah, I would say The Iron Lady is one that stuck out to me, playing Margaret Thatcher, which Helen Mirren also is well known for playing British royalty when we talk about her. And then Mamma Mia obviously is one as well. And then she's just been, like you said, she's been in a lot of things that I don't know that I'm necessarily like crazy about, but people have a lot of respect for her, and she's obviously, there or thereabouts when she does do something with critical acclaim.
Yeah,
for her acting. Now she hasn't done anything since the last movie she was in was 2021.
Yeah.
So It's been a little while. I don't know if she's officially or unofficially retired, but certainly a prolific career.
All right, Helen Mirren. What comes to your mind when you think of Helen Mirren?
So with Helen Mirren, obviously the role as Queen Elizabeth II, and I'm blanking on the name of the movie right now. I just had it up here.
There's Elizabeth, and then there's the Queen.
Yeah, the Queen is the one.
Yeah.
But then what I find really fascinating with Helen Mirren over the last like 10 years, 10 to 15 years, is that seems like she's just like having fun.
Yeah.
Like she's just doing what she wants to do. Like she's in Red and Red 2, and she's the voice in Barbie. She's the voice of the computer Deep Thought, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. She's in the Fast and the Furious movies because, but why? I don't know. Because she wants to be.
Yeah.
But I think she's like earned the right to basically do whatever she wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes that unique is there's really not a lot of like older actors or actresses who do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really kind of a cool thing because she put her work in early on in her career in like a lot of very serious roles. But then you also have like National Treasure, Book of Secrets that she was in, and some of these other things that it seems like she's always kind of she's made sure that she doesn't get stuck on a certain kind of thing, which I think is really to her credit.
Yeah, she is all over the place. And I would say with both of them, they're willing to take smaller roles. I mean, Meryl Streep is kind of known as this great actress, but she's willing to play bit parts if she likes the role or if it works for her. For Helen Mirren, I would think one of the primary ones I think of with Helen Mirren would be State of Play. I really like that movie, and that's one that I've come back to a number of times. So that's the first one that pops into my mind. I also remember her role from Raising Helen and from what's that movie? Yeah, I can't remember it all. I'm trying to look through the list. I can't find it at the moment, but the Red movies, yeah, Red and Red 2. As kind of the satirical spy action thrillers. So she's kind of been in a lot of different movies. Like you said, all of a sudden she shows up in the Fast and Furious movies, and you're like, what the heck? This is really interesting. She played the narrator in Barbie in the last year or so. So that's another one. Let's look at the numbers here for them. Helen Mirren, 65 films, 3 billion domestic, 5.4 billion international for $8.4 billion overall. That ranks her. I don't have the rank actually. I changed it, right? Okay, Meryl Streep, 2.6 billion domestic, 2.7 billion international, 5.4 billion overall. 74 roles for her. So Helen Mirren has her on box office revenue. Now, when we go over to Academy Awards, Meryl Streep has, in fact, 3 Academy Award Oscars, lots of nominations, but she won for the best leading role in The Iron Lady. And she won for actress in a leading role for Sophie's Choice back in 1983. And in 1980 for supporting actor in Kramer versus Kramer. So she's won these, and she's won them in a variety of decades. Now when it comes to Helen Mirren, Helen Mirren has 1 Oscar, and that she won it for best performance in a leading role, and she won that for The Queen. So both of them won for prominent British figures. And what else should we consider when it comes to Meryl Streep versus Helen Mirren?
I don't know if there's a whole lot other than, like you said, they've both acted in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. And they've forged careers over decades through changing roles as they've gotten older and as they've branched out a little bit.
Yeah, I think for me, Helen Mirren is the more intriguing, or one that I would choose in this debate, just because I really appreciate how she has leaned into having fun with what she's doing, because a lot of actors and actresses take themselves way too seriously, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm going to side with you on this one. I think it's Helen Mirren for me. I think Meryl Streep is probably the better known actress. Probably is known for being better. However, I agree. I just like Helen Mirren better. And I think she has the variety of movies she has succeeded with in the box office take the cake for me. All right. Well, that was fun. Let's wrap up today with a quick hit on our watch list. What did you watch this week, Rob?
So I did go see Alien Romulus in the theater. I still think Prometheus is slightly better for me, but this was very good. And I thought fit in really well with the Alien series. If you are a fan of the Alien series, I think you will be a fan of this movie. It has all the hallmarks of it. There's solo female protagonist against impossible odds. There's an android involved who's funny but also has some real serious moments. And obviously the alien monsters are creepy. One thing I would say, and I said to the people I watched the movie with, if you had never seen an alien movie, these things would be terrifying to you. But if you've seen them, like, you kind of know what they are.
Yeah.
So it does take some of like the fear away. So for me, it becomes more of like a thriller suspense type movie than a horror movie.
Okay.
But I thought they did a really good job with some of the set pieces and lighting, and not making everything super obvious that was about to happen. And there's a huge twist at the end, which was very disconcerting. And I'm not sure if I like it very much or not. I'm not going to tell you what it was. You have to watch it yourself. And I also saw on the opposite side of the spectrum, I went to the Mahoning Valley Drive-In Theater again, and they had a Disney night. So I surprised my wife and kids, and we made it through half of the Disney night. We saw Aladdin, and also The Little Mermaid was being shown. But after Aladdin was over and we drove home, it was still after midnight by the time we got home. So it's probably a good thing we didn't stay for The Little Mermaid, because we would have been home at like 2:30. So
yeah.
But just a quick shout out, if you ever do have an opportunity to go to the Mahoning Valley Drive-In in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, if you're around that area, our area, or close to that area, you should definitely check it out. They have some really interesting and cool double features that they do. They try to do almost everything they can in 35 millimeter film. They have a 35 millimeter projector, which is really awesome. Sometimes they have to get digital. They have the ability to do that too. And actually, when I was at the drive-in this last weekend, the person who designed the posters, they have posters that they do every week, and the person who designed the poster for this week was there, and it was really cool. It actually had characters from Aladdin and The Lion King on it, because originally that's what it was supposed to be, and they couldn't get the film for The Lion King, so they ended up pivoting to Little Mermaid. And he's like, I already made all these pictures with the Lion King characters on them, so I guess this is what I got. But he did a lot of like graphic and digital design with banners that they have for each of their things. I actually got one for my wife from a few years ago with the original Batman, because she loves the original Batman with Adam West. And he had made a banner for that for their drive-in show.
Nice.
So definitely go check that place out if you can. Their founder actually passed away earlier this year, but they're still continuing operation. And one of his dreams had been the Disney thing, and this was the first time they actually got it done, which is kind of a bittersweet thing, but it was really cool to see all the families. There's a costume contest, probably like 15 people participated in. It was just a lot of fun and a lot of people having a good time. Other than that one car that was shining their lights at me, you jerk.
All right. I only have one that I'm going to talk about today, and I'll just talk about The Killer. It was a Netflix film that came out last year. And I was really excited about it when it first came out, but it was Michael Fassbender directed by David Fincher. I'm like, oh, this is a great combination. And then I heard the reviews of the movie, and I'm like, and so I never got around to it. And then I watched it this week, And there's a reason why the reviewers were like, because it really seemed like they both phoned this movie in, to be honest. It did not, you put those type of actors in a Netflix movie, and it's like the Netflix of it all still is hard to get past because most of their movies I still have not been impressed with. And this is another one to add to that total. It's about an assassin, and basically, something goes wrong and he's got to get revenge. It's a very typical storyline, but they don't do any of the work to like make you care about the character or make you care about his revenge plot. And I'm just like, really? Like, they really didn't seem to put any effort into it. There are some classic like David Fincher visuals and things like that. Fassbender's a great line reader, so that's always nice. But yeah, there's just nothing to it. So yeah, I was disappointed in
I've not seen that yet, so maybe I won't.
it. I mean, you can check it out. I mean, it's not terrible, but like with that, with what they have to work with, it should have been much better than it was.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that is the show, everyone. Thanks for checking out Film for Fans. Make sure you check out filmforfans.com. Like, subscribe, tell all your friends, and we'll see you next time. Until then, enjoy the movies.